So let's revisit this idea of Python as a space delimited language. This means that white space has particular meanings within different structures of Python. So for instance, looking at this helper function here, we have this defined keyword. We've named our function, and then everything that needs to belong in that function definition needs to be indented for spaces. So these two statements here, both indented for spaces underneath this def keyword. So these belong to the add to function. If this were outside of the function, it would no longer belong to the function. You just have this random return statement. You would get a syntax error. This is true for all of our functions. Come down here to main and we see all of this stuff, all of this code that is indented belongs inside of this main function. When this function is defined, we have the def keyword and then we name our function, and everything after the colon that is indented is going to be a part of this function definition. Now within this function definition we have some other structures. We have this while loop here. And similarly to the, defining the function, everything that we want to belong to this while loop, all the code that we want to execute while this while loop is true, also has to be indented for spaces. Within this while loop, we have some selection statements. Everything that belongs to each of the selection statement, whether it's an if, an elif, or an else, has to be indented for spaces. If we unindented this print statement, it would no longer belong to this if statement. This if statement would get checked, this would be printed, and then you get a syntax error because this elif is kind of actually now hanging out all there by itself. It isn't no longer preceded by an if statement. So we have to pay very close attention to our indenting. It can cause syntax errors, it can cause logic errors, it can cause runtime errors. So if you're getting some errors, one of the things you want to make sure you do is double check your spacing. It's important that your update of your condition for your while loop is inside of that while loop, is indented for spaces. Otherwise, if this were not, this update would never happen until the loop ended. We have no way of changing the condition of the loop, so we have no way to get it to end. So this would be an infinite loop. So if you have an infinite loop, check and make sure that you have a way to update the loop that is indented inside of your loop. This print statement is not inside of the loop. It does not print until we've actually exited this loop, until the condition is false. So indenting is really important in Python. Other languages don't care about spacing. You could actually have all your code on one line if you wanted. I'd make it not very readable, so that's not recommended at all. But Python actually forces you to structure your code in a certain way because the spaces actually mean something. Specifically these indents underneath the different structures within Python. Let's also revisit keywords in Python. We talked about how, in addition to following the rules for naming functions, variables, and classes, we can't use any existing functions, and we also can't use any built-in Python keywords. These are like, you can think of these like commands in Python. These aren't functions. These are just reserved special words that tell Python to do something. So let's take a look at this list of Python keywords and see which ones we've already seen. So we can't name a variable and. This is a logical operator that tells us that the condition on either side both has to be true for the compound statement to be true. We haven't used some of these yet, but these are also Python keywords. We've used the def keyword to define a function. We've used elif and else. We've used false. This is just the Boolean value that means false. The for, we've done for loops now. This creates a for loop for us. You can use from in your import statements. We haven't really done a lot of that, but it allows us to import specific parts of a module instead of just the entire module. We're not going to use global because we're not going to use global variables in this class. If we've seen that, that makes a conditional statement. We import. We've talked a little bit about in and is, and we'll see a little bit more of that. We won't use lambda in this class. We've seen none, that's the special null value in Python, and that's the default of a Python, the default return of a Python function. We've used not already and or. Those are some logical operators. And we've also used pass when we're stubbing out functions that we don't want to code right now. We just want to kind of leave it as a placeholder. Return, this lets us return a value from a function. It also lets us exit that function. We've used true. True is the Boolean value. While creates a while loop for us. Again, so these are all special keywords, special commands in Python. These are not functions. You're not going to use these with parentheses for the most part. You're not. These aren't actually the names of functions that we're using. These are just keywords that do things for us. We can't use these words to name any variables or any functions or any classes or files. Most importantly, though, we need to make sure that we understand how these work, how to use them, and we don't use them like functions. So you're not going to, for instance, have parentheses after return. We're not sending anything to a return function. Return is just a specific keyword. So I hope this clears up any confusion we might have about keywords. So a few errors that I've noticed in assignments is you guys using these as if they are functions, specifically return, trying to use return as if it's a function. Return is not a function, it's actually sort of a command. It's a special thing in Python. So I hope this helps. Let me know if there's anything else I can clear up for you. Happy programming.